Hi, in this session, we are going to talk about what is ticket management, what is an incident, service request, or what is a change request. We are going to talk more detail about that in the ticket management system. So in ticket management, you have three kinds of tickets. The first one is incident. Okay, then you have service request and change request. Let's look at what is a incident and when it is created or how it is automatically created. What is a service request? What kind of information we can ask in a service request? Change request is a planned activity. So what kind of change request we have to raise or how a change request is raised and what kind of information is put. All those things we are going to discuss in this slide. Now, an incident is a something which happens immediately. So something has happened and we have to address it. Now that is called as an incident. Okay. Now say for example it's a production system. The databases are up. Okay. Suddenly the database has gone down. So now that is an incident. So the DB has to log in, check why it has to go down. So first he has to bring up the database. So this kind of things is called as an incident. So, say for example, I'm not able to log into the system. I was able to log in till yesterday, but today I'm not able to log in. That is an incident. That is, I can't use my application. Okay. Now, there is incidents are created for something like threshold breaches also. Like, say for example, I have a file system. Okay, which has breached the threshold. Like, I want to get an alert when, my threshold has breached more than 70%. So those kind of things can be automated or set manually, and which are happens in a production environment, they are called as incidents. Now, application guys also can raise the incidents manually because those are not automatic, like some functionality breaks or something happens, they will raise the incident. Now, what is a service request? Now, I need some information. Okay, then I will raise a service request. Okay, now remember, this is not an incident, or incident is also called as something like an accident. Something has happened which need to be addressed. But service request is I want some information. It's not urgent, but I need this information for doing some activity or something. Then it is called as service request. We raise a service request, and the priority for service request will be less. Then you have change requests. Now, change requests are planned activities. So, your regular maintenance activities or new code releases, some parameter change. I want to change some parameters which requires an outage. Now, those kind of changes can be planned in advance and executed. So, now those kind of changes or activities which can be planned and executed fall under the category as change request. So this change request is a planned activity. So you get all the required approvals, then you plan a date, time, then on that day, time, there will be somebody who is coordinating the activity and the activity will be carried out. So what all the requests like communication has to go before this activity, all those things will be included in your change request. So what are the different kinds of change requests we have? So you have something known as standard changes and normal changes. Now standard changes are simple changes in the application which do not require an outage to the system. That is, the end user does not see any issues. That is, my system is not affected. It's only that I change the parameter and immediately it gets reflected, or I change the code, immediately it gets reflected, and no functionality is broken or anything. Now, those kind of activities can be put in your standard changes. Now, the normal changes is like your outage is involved. I have to restart, there is outage involved. I have to inform all the relevant groups. I have to take approval from all the relevant people. I have to inform the outage to the customers also, saying that during this time, from this time to this time, the database or your application will not be available. Now, those kind of changes will fall under your normal changes. Now, major difference between standard change and normal change is in standard change, you don't require approvers or we don't require approval from anybody. It can be planned and executed. But in normal change, all the relevant groups which use that application, the database, those approvals will be required. And the outage which is going to happen has to be communicated to the end customer properly. So what are the different phases? Say somebody has created an incident. So what are the different phases in your incident? So when somebody creates an incident, it is in the open phase. then a appropriate priority is set. So depending on your SLA, that is service level of agreement, you can decide whether it is a P1, whether it is a P2, whether it is a P3. So if it is a P2 or P1, we have to get address it immediately because the SLA will be tight. So maybe I have to pick up within half an hour and fix it within 3 hours like P2, or P1 immediately I have to pick up and start addressing it. P3 I have flexibility, like I can pick it up within 3 hours and address it within next 8 hours. So depending on what the end customer has signed a SLA with the company, the appropriate priority will be set for an incident when it is open. Now, once it is open, somebody will assign that incident to himself because he is going to work on that incident. So then the incident moves to what is known as assigned phase. Now, the engineer is going to work on that incident, and then if he fixes the problem, he will put that in a service restored mode. Okay, that is service restored means I have fixed the issue, the system has come back. Like I had an issue with the database was down. I have brought up the database. Now everybody is able to connect. That is a fix to the issue. So then the ticket is moved to the service restored. Now, in some cases, say for example, there is a my server has gone down. Okay, now I'm trying to bring up my server, but I identified that some part has got damaged, or it's not working. Now I have to order a new parts. Now this ordering of new parts, I have to place a invoice. I have to the parts have to become from the shop, and then I have to fix it. Now that this particular phase, where I can't do anything, I have to wait for this order to complete all those things. We can't do anything with this incident. That time we put the incident in the parked stage. So I park my incident because I don't want the SLA to be applied to this incident and the time to be counted, because that is not under my control. So I park my incident. Once the hardware part, everything up comes, we can fix it, and then we can take it out of the park state. Okay, then once the issue is completely resolved, we can move the incident to the closed phase. That is closed phase. In some cases, like P1 and P2, for every incident, you may want to do an RCA. What is an RCA? Root cause analysis. Okay, I want to do an RCA where I want to do a root cause analysis because I want to identify what was the cause of the problem so that I can prevent that in the future. So I don't want that issue to occur again in the future. So I want to prevent. Then I may want to do an RCA and see what is the cause of the issue and identify if any other systems are going to get affected because of that issue. Then I may want to plan a change to implement that change, the fix which I have done for this system on other system also, using a change request. So these are the phases normally in your incident. Now, what are the phases in your service request? Now, in service request, user is requesting for information. Like I want to know the value of a parameter. I want to know the size of this database. I want to know the size of the tables. I want to know how much space is allocated. Those kind of requests fall under your service request. Okay, so the service request is information requirement. So that is because I don't have access, I'm raising a service request to relevant team to get my details. So you usually have only two phases, that is open a service request. When an engineer gives you all the information, he closes the service request. So in a service request, we only have two phases, open and close. Then you have the change request. What are the phases in your change request? So if it is a standard change, we don't have any approvals required. So usually you will have only two phases. One is plan and development when the user creates the service request. Okay, then you have your execution phase. Okay, so during the execution phase, the implementer will implement the change, then he will close it. So standard change usually has a plan and development and execution phase. Then you have normal changes. What does normal changes have? You have build and test. So I have created the normal change. I have put in all the relevant information required, the implementation plan, the approvers, everything, all the details I have put in the change. Then it goes to the approval phase. That is, whoever has been put or listed as approvers, they have to approve this change. Depending on the implementation notes, depending on the data which has been provided in the change, whether outage has been communicated, whether it has been properly planned or not. All those things, depending on how many teams are necessary, they will approve it. Once it is approved, it goes into your deployment stage. That is, you are going to implement the change. Now, if anybody in the approval phase rejects the change, then it comes back to your build and test. That is, the requester who has raised the change has to correct whatever, for whatever reason the change has been denied, and then resubmit for approval again. So now once it is in the deployment and one is implemented, it goes to the close phase, either successful or on a failure. If it is a failure, you will do a rollback and then close the normal change. Now, in normal change, we create tasks. Okay, so for example, one particular activity, there can be multiple people or multiple teams involved. Okay, so you have to assign tasks to each group, and each task will have a start and end time, and each task will have the relevant implementation steps for each of the groups. Okay, now once the each of the groups have completed the task, they can close it as completed, or if it has failed, they can mark it as failed, or they can cancel the task. Okay, so during the deployment phase of this change, in a normal change, you will have a change coordinator also. Now, what is the role of a change coordinator? He has to coordinate, because you have multiple tasks, multiple groups involved. He has to coordinate the change. So he will coordinate, contact the first team, ask them to complete. If it is successful, he will ask the second team to start his activity. So similarly, he will coordinate and successfully complete the change. So those particular role is called as the change coordinator. So for every change requester, we need to have a change coordinator also. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, you can write to me on ramesh.postgres@gmail.com.